New Yorkers' water bills are about to go up thanks to a move from the mayor's office of management and budget, a hidden tax, and no one knows it.
So New York City owns the manner in which every single person here gets their water, and since the city's broke, they're now gonna rent us this vital natural resource, while at the exact same time doing something else that'll save you money, but only if you're rich.
For many New Yorkers, it might feel like flushing money straight down the drain. The complicated move has mostly flown under the radar.
We know the cost of living in New York City has skyrocketed.
You ever think about leaving the city?
Oh, yes.
We make decent salary, but it's still not enough to survive in New York City.
I think there needs to be subsidies for like the middle income individuals.
New Yorkers are feeling less positive, not very safe, and unsatisfied with most city services.
New census numbers show New York's population dropping roughly 630,000.
The problem is we're seeing more people move out than in.
Pay hikes are not keeping up with inflation. Half of the families in the 5 boroughs do not have enough income to make ends meet.
And only 11% feel the government is spending tax dollars wisely.
Just when you thought you were a free man in a free country, your city starts renting you renewable natural resources. But what nobody's talking about is although this secret tax is going to make life harder for pretty much everybody, the city's figured out another way to help you save money as long as you're super wealthy and also kind of a criminal. Because the city has silently stopped collecting property taxes and is right now owed $880 million. Which means the big losers from the city's new plans are everyday New Yorkers who will feel this tax in their wallets, which are already at a breaking point. New York's already got some of the highest rents in the entire country, the least affordable groceries in the entire country, and every time we try to buy clothes or toothpaste or groceries because of out-of-control shoplifting, those prices are higher than they were yesterday because stores have to make up for losses. Which is kind of what the city's doing. They're spending billions of dollars while at the exact same time not collecting the money they're owed from people who have it, which is why they're now making up their losses by taxing the rest of us in a way they hope we don't realize. On top of that, the city wastes money on absolutely everything it touches. Just look at our $20 billion a year subway, which is the world's most embarrassing piece of public infrastructure, rusting and falling apart while people try to use it. Not to mention the place is overrun by criminals, and now we've got the National Guard policing it. But before we go over all of the ways New York City plans to pull money out of the pockets of average, everyday working people, it's important to understand how much more expensive it's going to get to live in the smallest, tiniest apartments anywhere in America.
Councilmember James Gennaro is frustrated, to say the least, at what he calls a hidden tax. The mayor's office is making use of a little-known funding mechanism. The city plans to charge its own water board more than $1.4 billion over the next 4 years to lease its water and sewer systems from the city.
So we're at a point now in America where the government can tax itself and then pass that tax on to me and to you. And that's essentially what's happened here. The city is charging itself rent to use its own infrastructure, and then that fee is going to be passed along to every single person's faucet. Because if the government's bills have gone up, they've got to get the money to pay them from somewhere, and it's coming from us. And this has a lot of frightening implications for renters because rent is already as high as it's ever been, and now it's just gonna go higher because the bills in order to stay in an apartment, those are going up. And what that means is if you own your own home, your water bill when you use your little astronaut shower is gonna go up a lot. But if you rent, you might be thinking, hey, I pay $31.95 for this one bedroom and the landlord includes the water, so it doesn't bother me. Wrong, the water that comes out of here comes from somewhere, and if the owner's bills for providing it go up, rents are gonna end up going on. That cost is gonna get passed from the government to the landlord to the renter. And what that means is the city just made it much more expensive for all of us to live here. And there's absolutely nothing any of us can do about it, but it gets even worse.
To cover that cost, the Water Board, in line with a proposal from the DEP, is planning to raise water rates for homeowners and landlords by 8 to 9%, according to the New York Times.
So I guess this whole thing wouldn't be that bad if the other costs associated with living in an apartment, the other utilities weren't also going through the roof. And the reason that's a problem is because the landlord doesn't just pay utilities for your apartment. He also has to pay fees to keep the whole building well run. And the landlord has to pay for all the utilities required to light and heat the insides of this place. And that's the thing. Every single building in town is gonna use water. Every building, not just apartments. But as you'll soon see, every single landlord who has to raise their rent because they're passing on these costs is going to get away with it. There's no escape because we're in the middle of a housing crisis. And look at this, the apartment vacancy rate, it's the lowest it's been in 50 years. The city has around 2 million apartments, and if 1.4% of those are available to be rented, that's only 28,000 apartments, which might sound like a lot, but in a city of 8 million people, that's not enough apartments for people to move around. Certainly not enough apartments to sustain the amount of people that want to come here this year, which is why prices are just going through the roof. And even though we haven't even gotten into why the city is allowing the rich to escape paying taxes they're coming after every single person for, at least we can sleep easy knowing that all of the money the city is gonna earn from jacking up everybody's rents effectively is going to a good cause, right? They wouldn't waste it, would they?
And that money would go into the city's general fund. And according to Gennaro, that's one of the biggest problems.
And most people's reasonable belief is that when you get a bill from DEP and you pay your water and sewer bill, you have the reasonable expectation that that's going to water and sewer. It's not going to the Parks Department, it's not going to the police, it's not going to the fire department, it's not going to, all these other agencies.
So the not so reassuring part of all of this is that the city doesn't have any idea where this money is going. Once it goes into the general fund, that's like a piggy bank that they could use for pretty much anything. Now, of course, the city says that all of this money is going to be used towards improving infrastructure, which sounds great until you look at the fact that every single time a government entity says it's going to improve infrastructure, a lot of times that doesn't happen. Speaking of which, last September's floods that occurred during normal weather patterns are going to take 10 years to fix. And this is what residents of Brooklyn have to look forward to for the next decade. And look, the sewer systems in New York, this system is over 100 years old. It wasn't designed for the massive number of people that are living here today. But the real problem here, and the thing that should alarm almost everybody, is that even if you don't live in New York City, just by coming here, you're gonna end up paying these fees as well. So here we are on your average everyday residential street in Manhattan. We've got a lot of businesses here. Some of them are closed. It's very tough to operate a business here. Except for that one during the summertime. Anyways, these businesses, like the 2 hair salons on this block, they use water. They've got to pay for that water, and how do you think they're gonna get the money? They're gonna look, rightly so, at this water bill increase as a tax on their business. And if they don't want to close and shut down, they're gonna have to come up with that money, and they're gonna get it from their customers, who could be just about anybody. You don't have to live here to shop at one of these places. Also, typically these businesses pay a share of the building's common charges for electricity. Sometimes they even pay taxes, which is why it's so hard for these places to stay open in the first place. But think of how much worse things are for a water-dependent business like a hair salon. A place like that, or a place like this tea house that serves food, they need a lot of water, which means the percentage increase that a place like this pays is gonna be much higher than the convenience store next door, just because they use so much more water to begin with. Ditto this budget-friendly hotel across the street. It's not gonna be budget-friendly forever if water bills keep going up, because every single person in here is taking a shower either yesterday or today, hopefully. So, okay, if you don't live here and you wanna visit one of these little businesses, you're gonna pay the fee too. But you know what really stinks? If you do live here, you get hit once on your rent because that's going up because of the water, and then everything that you buy, every store that you go into, you get hit again. So this is hitting local residents twice. And that's because the people living in these apartments upstairs, they can't do what the business downstairs does and pass the costs on to anyone else. Did you know the water bills are going up? Did you hear about that?
Yes, I did.
Do you rent or do you own?
We rent.
You rent. Do you think your landlord is gonna...
Absolutely not. He's gonna stack it right on the rent.
Man.
You know the deal. They said 4.7%.
And you know something? When you look at how this is gonna affect normal people that live here and are just trying to get by, the fact that the city is doing other things that help the rich save money when they break the law, that really just feels like a slap in the face. So all around us, you'll see plenty of New York City apartment buildings, and we already know how the people inside are gonna pay higher rents because of these new water bills, but did you know that the landlords of properties just like this all over town owe a combined $880 million in back property taxes? The top delinquent is an owner of a 16-unit apartment building, and they owe $52 million in taxes. And to many people, the idea of a landlord running a for-profit business, profiting tremendously during New York City's housing crisis, and still not having to pay any taxes is ridiculous. Which means not only is the city making things harder for everyday average people, if you're a criminal and you're breaking the law, they're protecting you. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like the experience of any shoplifter in New York who's gotten away with it? Yes, it does. We're living in a city that protects those who do the wrong thing. But what doesn't make sense is why it is so hard for the city to go after the owner of something like this, which is big, which is visible, which isn't going anywhere, which is generating an income. Which is crazy, right? Like, how is there no way to not go after whoever owns this and get the money that you're owed when it's making money? Apparently, the real reason this is happening is because in the past there was a program to crack down on landlords who didn't pay, but the city decided to let that expire for some reason. Now, apparently in the past, if you were a property owner and you didn't pay your property taxes, the city could seize your building and auction it off to pay the debt that they were owed. And as you can imagine, compliance was a lot higher. But go figure, now that there's no consequence, there's no compliance. People just aren't paying. But when you consider that property taxes go to 45% of the city's revenue, not collecting them is a pretty big deal. And the fact that the worst of the worst criminal elements in New York City are getting away with this is beyond anybody's comprehension. But believe it or not, guilty property owners who don't pay their taxes, they're not the only criminals in town this city is protecting, making our lives as the everyday working men and women of this city more expensive than they need to be.
While you may be paying your parking and speeding tickets, turns out many other New Yorkers are not. And by many, I mean a lot. New York City is owed more than $2 billion in unpaid fines.
Honestly, is anybody surprised that if the city won't go after the landlords of these buildings for unpaid property taxes, they're not going after the cars that get parking tickets either? Is that a surprise to anybody at this point? What's even dumber about this is that the city spends resources sending out meter maids all day long writing parking tickets. And every single day, wages are paid, people are employed to give these out, and the city doesn't even collect the money that it's getting from them. Which means not only is the city losing out on money that they're owed, they're wasting money to find out that it's owed to them, and they're never gonna collect it. And each parked car in this town has a license plate, a VIN number, there's a paper trail, we know who owns it. There's literally zero reason to be missing out on this money. Yet it's happening, which creates a situation where, since the law-abiding are the only ones that end up paying the tickets, they end up being the ones subsidizing illegally parked cars. Which means the cheapest way to survive in New York is just to break the law, because there aren't any consequences for doing that. There are, however, consequences for obeying the law. You just end up paying more and more and more because other people don't. And critics say the reason this is happening is because the city has been mismanaged for years. And now all of this mismanagement has reached a point where enforcement looks and seems like it might be impossible. In fact, it might be, because we've recently cut down our police force. Plus, we've cut other things to save money, like our libraries. Which means it's almost like the city has figured out that it's easier to take things away from the law-abiding than it is to try and go and get them to criminals who've broken the law.
The device is called the Barnacle, and it sucks onto the windshield of cars whose owners aren't paying their parking tickets. Over the past few days, the NYPD has launched a pilot program using the device to target illegally parked trucks in Queens.
Makes it impossible.
No, we don't need this. We don't need some new thing that costs money and enriches some private company. We need to just do our job. We need to go after the people who are illegally parked. We need to find them. We need to get that money. Like here we have a brand new Mercedes parked in front of a bus stop. Why not give this person a ticket? Of course they've got the money to pay it. But no, instead we want to invest in some fancy new piece of plastic to do the exact same thing. And this is just one example that critics say explains how the city finds the worst possible manner to enforce any of its laws. They don't even have enough of these windshield barnacles to put one on every illegally parked car. It's a pilot program. And you know what? The only people that are going to pay the fines associated with those are going to be the law-abiding, because the criminals are going to find a way around these things, just like they did the old parking boots. And what all of this means is that New York is turning into a place that is either too mismanaged or too poorly run, or both, to do anything other than go after people who obey the law and take what they can from them, because criminals are just getting away with everything, and going after them is too much work. That's what we've decided here as a city. And literally the same thing playing out in drugstores all across town with their plastic cabinets and their jacked up prices is playing out here gear in the lives of law-abiding because the city is just passing on the costs of its losses to the only people left in town who will willingly pay it. And the real question is, how long does New York City think the law-abiding will go on subsidizing the criminal elements that have been allowed to profit here? Like, in what planet can the people living inside the apartment end up being more law-abiding and more responsible for bills that the owners should be paying to begin with? And would our water bills even be going up if landlords were paying their taxes? And speaking of which, the city's next money grab is gonna be those congestion cameras. Those get turned on in about a month. And you know what? They're gonna earn billions of dollars in revenue, which is gonna go to the subway where they don't enforce the fares because people jump and ride for free. Isn't that crazy? What do you think? How should New York City collect the money that it's owed? Should it punish people? Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.